It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Hey, we're winning a couple of games. Are we back? I don't know if we're back, but it is a very good feeling to watch the New York Mets play baseball games and to actually see them win. It's a 2-game winning streak against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Let me just get this out of the way right now. Okay, while I'm happy the Mets won on Thursday, I was in the building for that game. While I was happy they held on to win Friday, I cannot come on the Rico Brogna and start to wax poetic about how we're back. I can't do that. I can call it like I see it, and the way I see it is that this baseball team was bound to get hot at some point, and maybe a 2-game winning streak against the Arizona Diamondbacks counts as hot. The timing of it is interesting because you go back to Wednesday. Wednesday was a pound-for-pound, terrible, terrible day. And we don't need to go read through it. We've talked a lot about it, whether it was on the Rico a couple of days ago or certainly on WFA on our show throughout the station. But Edwin Diaz gets hurt. Pete Alonso gets hurt. We later find out not that big of a deal. They lose again to the LA Dodgers. They get swept. Jorge Lopez throws his glove. We know about the post-game press conference. And then they have a team meeting. And I said this the other day. The only thing ultimately we care about as fans is them winning and them finding a way to win. And usually team meetings don't do much. At least in the short term, it looks like it's done something. And we've heard some details, small details, about what was discussed. You know, one thing that was interesting on the SNY broadcast on Friday's game was that veteran players should feel comfortable telling other veteran players things they're noticing that maybe they can fix. Small things like that don't get us excited, but anything that's going to help this team win games, anything that's going to make this season more bearable than the crap we've watched over the first 2 months, I'm game for. And look, should there probably have been a team meeting, let's say 2 weeks ago? Sure. Maybe as opposed to waiting until you hit rock bottom against the Dodgers on a Wednesday where everything went wrong, but better late than never. Because I think for those of us that still watch every single game, no matter the record, no matter how bad things are going, no matter how limited our expectations may be, we just want to see this team win and we want to see them play good baseball. They have won 2 games against the Arizona Diamondbacks. You still see issues with this team through the 2 wins against the Arizona Diamondbacks, but they did win games. Let's recap them. Let's go to Thursday's game. Thursday was an odd night. I went to the game. It was a friend's birthday bash. So I was sitting way upstairs, like 521, section 521 at Citi Field. Believe it or not, my first time ever sitting in the 500s at Citi Field. My seasons are on the 300s. I have sat in the 400s. I have gone bougie every once in a while by sitting lower, but I've never sat in the 500s. And my first kind of impression of it was it's not a bad seat. You know, I think back to the old Yankee Stadium and the old Shea Stadium. Man, when you were in the upper deck, it was high. Like you were in the clouds, man. You were in the heavens. But when you sit in the 500s at Citi Field, not nearly as steep as those old ballparks. I noticed a couple of things. The first thing I noticed is that nobody was there and half the concessions were closed, which I admit bothered me. It was a rare night where I was going to go eat food at Citi Field. I don't usually do that. And I see that Pat LaFreda's is closed. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Why is LaFreda's closed? Then I see that this delicatessen, which looked pretty good, was closed. Like, what's happening? Now, I settled for some pretty good pizza, but nevertheless, I was a little surprised and perturbed that it seemed like a lot of the concessions were closed. Now, early in this game, you had the oddity of the catcher's interference, which was very, very weird. It was very, very weird only because, like, I was at the concession while watching the game on a big screen and memorizing it to put down in my scorecard. That's what I was doing at this point. And I see Jock Peterson fly out, and I'm like, oh, wow, that was a really quick top of the first inning by Christian Scott. Great. Then all of a sudden I get my pizza and I sit down at one of those chairs in the 500 levels in the promenade. They've got that big kind of mall area in the promenade behind home plate. Really cool area. And I looked at my wife. I said, why is this inning continuing? She had no idea. So obviously I went back and saw it. Man, we see so many catcher's interferences now in Major League Baseball. It's kind of crazy. I guess pitch framing is a big part of it. But luckily for Christian Scott, he turned that miscue, if you will, by Omar Narvaez into just nothing because he was able to get through the inning. And then look, Zach Gallen is one of the better pitchers in baseball. And so when Zach Gallen clearly has that hamstring issue, second batter of the game, I feel bad for him. But I think all of our reactions are great. Get this guy out of the game. And that's where a game that the Mets needed to win, because they just need wins, became even more a game they needed to win. Because now Zach Gallen's out of the game, one batter in. You're facing a cavalcade of Arizona Diamondback relievers. There is no excuse. And you have 2 on and nobody out after, who is pitcher number 1? Let me look down. Bryce Jarvis came in and walked DJ Stewart. And you got 2 on and nobody out. And you got 3, 4, 5 coming up. And you just got Zach Gallen out of the game. And you can't score. That's why the Mets have won 2 games in a row, and that's great. But when you look deeper or you think back to the specifics of these 2 games, there's a lot of things that make you want to rip your hair out. There's a lot of things that remind you maybe we're not back. You have 2 on and nobody out with Nimmo, JT, and Starling Marte coming up, and you do nothing. And we see Torey Lovello basically go deep into his bullpen, very deep into his bullpen. Look, Christian Scott made the one bad pitch to Ketel Marte, the ripped double down the right field line. Other than that, I thought Christian Scott was pretty good. Had to battle. They certainly made him work, but he gave you 5 quality innings. I'll mention this because we are talking about Christian Scott. Sending him down is not a big deal. I think we see that Christian Scott was sent down, and the reaction is, what the hell are they doing? I am going to comfortably think and believe that because of the off days, because of the London trip, because they're in a 6-man rotation, and I guess they are worried about an innings limit on him, why not send him down? Yeah, steal an extra roster spot, and you probably don't have to pitch him now for the next week and a half anyway. But the innings limit thing, here's where I pause on that. I'm looking over at what the Yankees are doing, and I'm intrigued because Luis Gil, who's been unbelievable for the Yankees, I mean, he may be the best pitcher in the American League right now. Him or Seth Lugo, take your pick. It's amazing. But Luis Gil had never thrown more than 90 innings in any season in his career. So I was certainly making the assumption on WFAN when we talked about it, there's got to be an innings limit on him. Like, there's no way the Yankees are going to allow Luis Gil to go from never pitching more than 90 innings to basically going maybe double. And right now, he's sort of out of pace to go to double. And the Yankees, based on their actions and based on their words, are changing the approach. They are not having a hard innings limit on Luis Gil. They're examining his stuff. They're examining his arm. And if they see things that make them think he's wearing down, then sure, they may shut him down. But the Yankees aren't going to have an innings limit on him. And the reason I believe them is based on the way they've been using it. Like, it certainly doesn't seem like a team that is going to shut him down. And I only bring that up not because we're the Hensley Mulans all of a sudden. I bring it up in relation to Christian Scott. Like, why is there an innings limit? Now, maybe the Yankees are wrong, and maybe the way they're handling Luis Gil won't work long term. I have no idea. But why do the Mets feel the need to be really, really careful with Christian Scott? And I'm just asking the question. I'm not necessarily annoyed by it because I don't know what the right answer is on how you handle young pitching and you handle elevating the amount of innings they're going to throw. Now, I would be annoyed if the Mets are BSing us and all of a sudden they're just back to a 5-man rotation and we don't see Christian Scott till July. That would annoy me. But I'm going to take them at face value based on the schedule that they have upcoming with the London series and having multiple off days, that the Mets are just looking at it saying, 6-man rotation is one thing. A 6-man rotation when you're barely playing. So now you got guys pitching once every 9 days, not ideal. But he pitched fine on Thursday night. He did a really good job against Arizona. He made the big pitch when he needed to. He got the big back-to-back strikeouts to end that fourth inning after he got in a little bit of a trouble spot. He pitched a 1-2-3 fifth inning. I was expecting more. I was hoping for more, but 5 very good innings out of Christian Scott. Francisco Lindor, man, look, we've given him a lot of crap, rightfully so. The number one thing you have to do is not call team meetings, it's perform. Calling a team meeting may be a good thing, and being a good leader certainly is a good thing, but ultimately, all of that means nothing if you don't perform. And on Thursday night, a day after the team meeting is called by the leader of the New York Mets, Francisco Lindor, and I think it's obvious he is the leader of the team. Now, you can argue amongst yourselves if he's a good enough leader. Who the hell knows? We're not in the locker room. But he's clearly the leader of the team. I give him credit for this. Brett Beatty, who's now a minor leaguer, looking like Brooks Robbins defensively most of the season. I give Lindor credit for that. He was working with him during the offseason. But the number one thing Francisco Lindor needed to do was perform. And he did that Thursday. He went 4 for 4, and I thought that the home run he hit in the third inning was a very, very significant home run in that game. You're down 2-0. Scott just gave up those runs. Lindor is behind in the count, and he pounds one over the left field fence. I thought that was a very, very significant home run by Lindor. It turns a 2-0 game into a 2-1 game, makes it a closer game. You immediately get one of those runs back. But that very same inning, Jeff McNeil comes up with 2 on and 2 out. And after his incident of throwing his bat, which he does all the time, here's a big spot for you, Jeff. Here's a big spot for you to get a big hit, tie the game up, maybe give him the lead, and he grounds out. He has been so useless this season, just so incredibly useless. When Pete Alonso popped his head out in the 7th inning to pinch hit for Brett Beatty, I was really surprised. I got to tell you, even though the reports came back clean on Pete and they just said, he'll be okay, it's day to day, I didn't think he was getting into this game. And credit to Pete. Same thing as Lindor a few innings early. He's behind the count. They're down by a run in the 7th inning. He rips that double. And luckily, Francisco Lindor drove him in because Harrison Bader came up to pinch hit for Omar Narvaez, also useless, also gone, and did not come through. And Francisco Lindor did. That was the other monumental hit that Lindor got in this game. Not just the home run in the 3rd, but the RBI single with 2 outs in the 7th that tied this game up at 2-2. And the Met bullpen, and I have to name a specific guy. You may not like this, but again, you got to give credit where credit is due when someone plays well. Adrian Hauser has been a weapon out of this bullpen. Terrible starting pitcher, abysmal starting pitcher. Please, dear God, let's never see him start a game again. But Adrian Hauser now, a couple of times out of the bullpen, has given the Mets key innings. Did that on Thursday with a good 6th, with a good 7th, worked around the Francisco Lindor error, got a couple of big strikeouts, got through the inning. Danny Young, I mean, who the hell knew? The man named to replace the DFA'd Jorge Lopez. Danny Young, top of the order. Bang, bang, bang. Who the hell saw that coming? And then obviously J.D. Martinez, who is now going through a little bit of a power surge, hitting the home run, just missed getting into the home run apple, giving the Mets the 3-2 lead. And then credit to Reed Garrett. He does issue that leadoff walk to Christian Walker, but gets through the inning, gets the save, and we got to win. Now, did I feel great about the win? No. I didn't feel great about the fact that you chase Zach Gallen out without him recording an out because he gets hurt. You face the entirety of the Diamondback bullpen, and all you can manage is 3 runs? Now, one thing I've learned, though, I have learned that even though you can complain about certain things from a game, the ultimate question is, did you win the game? And they won the game. So when I got in the car and I was driving home with my wife, it was a little bit of a date night, had a birthday bash, I didn't give a crap how they played. And really, sometimes it's healthier to just say, we won. Now, we're doing a podcast right now. We're talking openly about the Mets. I can't tell you, oh, we're back, we're great, because that would be ignoring some of the issues we've seen. But ultimately, right after a game is over and you watch the team win, whether you're watching it at home or you're in the ballpark, they won. That's all that matters. But listen, again, this is the Rico. We're talking honestly. The fact that they needed to, go up against Bryce Jarvis, Brandon Hughes, Justin Martinez, Joe Mantiply. Meanwhile, the guy they really hit was Ryan Thompson, the side-arming righty who's been very good this year. The fact that the Met offense couldn't break out against that was a little bit troubling. But they won. And when you put your head on the pillow Thursday night after the LOLness of the day before, that's a good feeling. And then you have Friday's game. This game, the game on Friday night, that showed me a little bit more. Like, the Mets have to earn our trust back. Like, I'll always play this game. Okay, the Mets are now 9 games under 500. That is terrible. No one's going to tell you that's good. What I would ask myself, and I would ask any Met fan out there, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of answers on this, whether it's on Twitter or the ricob@gmail.com, is what would it take for you to say, oh, wait, they're turning this season around. I'm starting to believe. I asked that question because I'm not there yet. I'm not telling you I am. That'd be a lie. I'm asking it because I am curious when that would be for all of us, because we're all different. I was saying on the air about Anthony Volpe's hit streak. Hey, at what point in that hit streak would you get excited? And everybody's different. I was saying on the air, I'm already excited. You get a hit streak to 21, 22 games, I'm intrigued. Because I think we forget how rare it is to have hit streaks that long. Okay, fine. Tiki was like, I ain't interested till it gets to 40. So it's similar here with the Mets. They've won 2 in a row. They're 9 games under 500. It's not a lot to write home about. What would it take for you to say, you know what? I'm believing in this team. Maybe it's 500. I think for me, and look, it's tough to put an exact total on it because I don't know what my emotions would say. But I think getting to 4 games under 500, like kind of being within striking distance of 500, would get me to say, okay, we got something going on. And keep this in mind. They're 9 games under 500. To get to what I just described, they got to go out and win 5 more in a row. That means they have a 7-game winning streak. Now, can that happen? I ain't banking on it, but it shows you that they have created quite a hole for themselves. Now, let me get to Friday and tell you the things that did make me feel good. That game could not have started off worse. You can't write a worse script to start a baseball game than a first pitch base hit, then a 3 pitches later balk, then a 2-2 hit batsman, followed by a 1-2 pitch RBI single. Like, this game could not have started worse for Luis Severino. Not a good start. Not an encouraging start. And then he gives up the base hit to Lourdes Gurriel. And now all of a sudden this game is 2-0. Then they can't turn the double play on Jake McCarthy. And now it's 3-0. And knowing this offense and knowing how much they've struggled and knowing how much they struggled the night earlier against the entirety of the Diamondback bullpen, I'm looking at 3-0 with a bad feeling. A bad feeling. I also had a bad feeling because I had started the game about an hour and a half late on DVR, and my sons were arguing. You ready for this argument? And I guess this says a lot about me. I got my oldest at a Planet of the Apes, all of them. And my youngest wants to be like my oldest. Everything is, what is Jet doing? What is Jet doing? They were fighting about which Planet of the Apes we would put on the TV. Are we putting the original? Are we putting Rise? And the third option was the cartoon from the mid-70s. That's the argument I'm dealing with. And I'm like, all right, boys, we just ran around outside. Mama was out. Dad's taking care of you guys. Let's just start the Met game. And that's how I started the Met game. It was quite an experience. And then finally they both passed out. And that was a lot of fun. But down 3-0, it is, I mean, does anybody feel good? I didn't feel good. And they responded. And the guy you got to give major props to, besides Lindor, because look, Lindor goes 4 for 4, and then he backs it up by getting on base 3 more times on Friday. So Francisco Lindor is red hot. We'll go into more details on him later. But Starling Marte. Starling Marte comes up with the bases loaded and 1 out in a 3-0 game. And I'm literally thinking and saying to myself, just get the ball out of the infield. Like I always say, when you're down 3 runs early, just get a run back, get 2 runs back. You don't have to get all of it. And Starling Marte on that 0-1 pitch, right off the bat, that laser beam felt Piazza-like, the way it picked up speed as it hit the outfield grass. Beautiful thing. Beautifully clutch 3-run triple by Starling Marte. And then Mark Vientos gets the infield single. Though when he gets that infield single, all I could think about was effing Matt Chapman and the game against the Giants. And Vientos coming up with the bases loaded, hitting that same roller to third base, except this time Eugenio Suarez can't make the play. It ain't Matt Chapman, who obviously threw him out. Mets lost the game. So for the Mets to come back after being down 3-0 and immediately make it a 4-3 game, encouraging. That's the word I'm going to use. That was slightly encouraging. And then it was just a big offensive day. Like Tomas Nido, man. I major credit to Tomas Nido. I've never been a Tomas Nido fan. I always thought he was overrated defensively. He's obviously not much of a hitter. He's hit a little bit this year, man. He's hit the ball hard a bunch of times. I was reading he has had more barrels this season than Jeff McNeil. That's unbelievable. But he starts off that second inning with a double. Lindor drives him in with that smoke double that I thought was getting out. Now, I was a little discouraged when the Mets get that run to make it 5-3. They got a runner on second, nobody out, and Pete Alonso can't get him in. Runner on third, nobody out, because Lindor stole third. Alonso can't get him in. Nimmo can't get him in. And then J.D. Martinez was robbed of a blue pit by Jake McCarthy. That was a little discouraging. That was one of those moments where you're up 5-3, but you're like, is that going to come back and bite them in the ass? And I thought it was in the third inning when Sevy gave him a run back, aided by the catcher's interference and aided by Jose Iglesias. And I'm glad they called up Jose Iglesias. I think it was inevitable that the Vientos Beatty thing wasn't going to work long term. And so they needed someone up here to be a middle infielder. Jose Iglesias' throws to first base on Friday night were, oh my God, like twice. Jose Iglesias is making wild throws to first base. Overall, he's an excellent defensive player. He's obviously not as used to playing second as he is shortstop, but they needed that kind of player up here for a few reasons. A, despite those horrible throws, he is a plus defensively. And B, Jeff McNeil is such a walking disaster right now that you cannot play him every day. And I know that Iglesias isn't a long-term solution, so it's not exciting to say, hey, play Jose Iglesias 2 or 3 times a week. But I think they have to. I mean, Jeff McNeil's hitting .225, and it's been going on for a long, long time. As far as Beatty going down, it had to happen. Like, it wasn't working. Vientos wasn't getting the opportunity he had deserved. Mark Vientos has earned the opportunity to play every single day, not just against lefties. And granted, the Mets are facing a lot of lefties over the next few days, and I'm sure that plays a part of it because Beatty could come back, and the Mets seem encouraged that he will come back. And he can. My question is going to be how you divvying up playing time, especially if Vientos is going to hit. And think about what Mark Vientos did on Friday. 3 hits. Had the infield hit for an RBI. Had an RBI single in the 4th. Had another base hit in the 6th inning. 3 more hits for Mark Vientos, hitting well over 300. I think we all knew eventually one of them was going down. And the guy to go down is Brett Beatty. He's been great defensively. He's not hit enough. But more than that, Vientos deserves the chance to play. The only other guy you could have sent down if you wanted to keep Beatty up here was DJ Stewart. I would have understood that. But I think the problem is Beatty and Vientos offer no flexibility because they're exclusively third basemen outside of first base. And if Pete's healthy, and Pete was back in the lineup on Friday, Pete's playing every inning. Mark Vientos comes in as an emergency, like we saw 2 days ago, and like we saw when he started Thursday's game. So that's the other option if you want to get Beatty back up here. But you just don't have a lot of flexibility. I wish one of them could just be stuck out in the outfield. Even if they're not great, it would help. But Mark Vientos getting to play every day, I'm a fan of that. I'm a damn big fan of that. That fourth inning was huge, though, to break the game open. Pete Alonso coming through with an RBI double. He had shown his frustration earlier. Marte with another RBI single. Vientos with an RBI single. And look, Sevy's able to go into the sixth inning. And he got run support. Able to hand the ball over to Dedniel Nunez, who looked good again, man. Every time he's been up here, he's actually looked sharp. Jake Diekman gave you a scoreless inning. And then we saw why it's tough to be so confident about the Mets moving forward and believing that this can be a sustainable winning streak. Earlier this, and I'm about to explain why, in my opinion, earlier this season, their bullpen was lights out. Lights out. Now, this moment, June 1st, their bullpen's a problem. Like, there is nobody in that bullpen anymore you can trust. Reed Garrett. And don't blame me. I don't want to hear this crap about, well, Evan, you shaved the bushy red beard. He's got a bushy red beard, and somehow I am causing Reed Garrett to for the clock to strike midnight and for him to turn back into a pumpkin. He did a fine job on Thursday. On Friday, when he comes in with a 5-run lead and promptly gives up a 3-run home run to Jock Peterson, and then on the next pitch gives up a home run to Christian Walker, clearly, Reed Garrett ain't the same. Adam Ottavino ain't the same. Sean Reed Foley, who's pitched well, was not exactly dealing on Friday night. There's nobody in this bullpen you could trust. So there are going to be days in which guys pitch well, like Danny Young comes out of nowhere and pitches well. Dedniel Nunez pitched reasonably well. But Otto and Garrett, who the heck do you trust? Like, who's the best Met reliever right now? Who's the guy you look at and say, I trust him the most? So a team that has now blown 9 games when they've had leads 7th inning or later, which is just completely unheard of, unfortunately, it scares me that that number is going to continue to grow. And I guess this is the sign of a bad team. The Mets broke out on Friday offensively. They scored 10 runs. And the Mets have too many talented offensive players to think that they're never going to hit. So the idea that they're about to get hot offensively, I buy it. I ain't arguing with that. But what I'm telling you is now their bullpen's going to be a problem. They almost blew Friday night's game. Think about it. The Mets go in to the 9th inning of this game with a 10-5 lead. And the Diamondbacks brought the tying run to the plate. That scares me moving forward. It does. So hopefully Edwin Diaz can get right. Hopefully this injury is minor and Edwin Diaz can come back off the injured list when he's eligible. And then more than that, can at least look somewhat like the Edwin Diaz from 2022, or even just the Edwin Diaz from 2021. Like, just don't be the guy from 2019. But hey, look, the Mets won a game. They won another game. They scored 10 runs. They got Luis Severino a win. People got to see their fireworks at Citi Field, and we are happy. Now, a couple of other things. Lindor's getting hot. And that's great. I think it makes him look good, too, because he's the one who called the team meeting, and he has responded with 4 for 4 and 2 for 4. So you go out and you respond by going 6 for 8, on base 7 times over the first 2 games of this series against Arizona. That is a monstrous victory. Or it's a monstrous hot streak. I don't know if it's a victory. I mean, it makes him look good. That's the bottom line. Now they got to get Brandon Nimmo going. He did have 2 hits on Friday. They got to get Pete Alonso going. He had the RBI double on Friday. It looks like Starling Marte maybe get going. He had 2 hits on Friday with 4 RBIs. Mark Vientos is hitting the crap out of the ball, and away we go. I think the way they handle second base now is going to be interesting because Jeff McNeil, and this is the way I would handle Jeff McNeil personally. I'm not cutting him. I'm not trading him. I mean, I am trading him, but I don't like trading people when their value is really low. I just don't think it's smart. It's not good business. So I'm not doing any of those things, even though there are some Met fans, and I understand why, who are like, man, I want the blood. I can't watch this guy anymore. What I would do is treat him like a part-time player until he proves he's not. It's unfortunate that you don't have a lot of options at second base. I mean, right now, it's literally Jose Iglesias. It's, hey, you don't want to play Jeff McNeil? Fine. Jose Iglesias is in the lineup. And for now, I'm okay with that. I'm not against that. Jose Iglesias is a major leaguer. Despite the 2 bad throws on Friday, Jose Iglesias is a good defensive player. And you know what? Maybe this wakes Jeff McNeil up. You are not guaranteed playing time. And also, since Carlos Mendoza has problems with certain emotions, maybe you should have a problem with the fact that Jeff McNeil cries after every out. Look, throwing your bat is not the same as throwing a glove into the stands. I get that. I'm not trying to equate it. But what I am saying is that guy's a baby every time he makes out. Not just once in a while, every time he makes out. One other thing, and I brought this up in depth at 4 o'clock on Friday's show. And I'm not going to go through every detail of this again. What I would say is, if you want to hear every detail of this, download the Evan and Tiki podcast, 4 o'clock specifically. Pete Alonso was made to look like a fool. Pete Alonso, and I think a lot of you guys have seen it, is in a viral video in which he's asked about the Jorge Lopez situation, and he cannot answer it. I don't know what to think. I'm not sure. And it made him look terrible. And that's on him. Look, it was not a good answer. And so I think that's caused even Met fans to turn on Pete and say he's not a leader. Well, first of all, I don't think Pete Alonso was ever the leader of this team. Like, I don't think that was ever a thing. I never thought he was the leader of this team. You don't have to be the leader of this team. He needs to be a productive baseball player. That's the most important thing, but not even the point. I didn't think much of it because, okay, he's coming across like a doofus. He doesn't seem to have an opinion on the Jorge Lopez situation. And the Jorge Lopez situation is multi-layered. It's throwing the glove. It's the press conference. It's showing no remorse. It's lying about not meeting with Stearns and Mendoza. But then the thing I was bothered by is it feels like everybody misinterpreted him, especially with English being his second language. And there's a lot of layers to that too. The Mets offered him an interpreter. He didn't accept it. His agent even said it was a mistake. I've said a lot of things about that on the radio. You could take a listen to it, whatever. But everybody's got an opinion on it. And so Pete Alonso can't give an answer. And it turns into a joke. Everybody's making fun of him. I then read a quote from Pete Alonso about the Jorge Lopez situation. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I thought he couldn't answer it. You know, why all of a sudden does he have this really, I would say, eloquent quote? Because his quote, and I know I'm being biased here because it's what I think, his quote was, hey, I feel bad for Jorge. I think he was misinterpreted, which is what I think. So I admit I'm biased that Pete Alonso offered the same opinion I had. But it bothered me that there's a video of him looking like an idiot, yet there's a quote from him in a Newsday article by Laura Albanese with him making a real comment. So I got a little journalistic. I said, well, this doesn't make sense. I need to find out more. And Laura Albanese is a great reporter. And so she supplied me with the audio of the entire Pete Alonso meeting with the media. And I appreciate her for doing that because by listening to it, I heard that, yeah, he had the moment where he couldn't answer it. And then right after, he did answer it. I don't know if some in the media are being dishonest on purpose or if it's just, hey, this is the one comment we're going to put out because it'll get a lot of clicks. I don't know. I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything other than Pete was done dirty, and I don't know why. So go back 4:00 on the Fan. The audio is not crystal clear because I think it was, from a recording device, but you can hear the whole thing. And maybe you get bothered by it. Maybe you're bothered about it the way I am. Like, why is only this being released? And then everyone makes fun of Pete Alonso and he's a terrible leader and he's an idiot and all that. Meanwhile, he did say something about the Jorge Lopez situation. With that said, Pete Alonso and his future with the New York Mets, in my opinion, is all about what he can be as a player, not what he is as a leader. Because I have never heard of Pete Alonso being the leader of this team. And by the way, that's not a bad thing necessarily. Not every baseball player is the leader of a team. I think back to the late 90s and the early 2000s. Who was the leader of that team? It was probably Robin Ventura. And that worked. That was fine. That was the right leader for this team. So the decision on Pete, whether it's trading him, whether it's re-signing him, I think a lot of it is the boring stuff that we've talked about, which is how much is he worth? And what do you think he ages out as a player? Like, I will admit this. For those that were against keeping him under the notion of, I don't like the way he's going to age, you guys have the facts on your side right now. Because Pete Alonso's last year and a half has not been as good as the previous year and a half. And as he gets older, that becomes a concern. So I raise my hands up. I admit that. There's a concern level to that. If Pete Alonso goes out and ends this season, and we'll see where his final numbers are, but if he ends it at 230, and let's say it's 37 home runs, 85 RBIs, 795 OPS, those aren't terrible numbers, but those are declining numbers. And when you got to make a decision on a long-term contract, yeah, those are facts that you have to keep in mind. As I sit here right now, I feel like the market is not going to be wonderful for him. And because of that, I think it almost increases the odds that he comes back, because who's going to pay him? Scott Boras and him could go ask for the moon. Who's going to pay him? But right now, the focus is go get hot. And I'm glad he's healthy. And one thing Pete did show over the last 2 days, and this is him and Francisco Lindor. I think both of these guys, and Brandon Nimmo, these three guys specifically, have this in common about the core of the Mets, which I know is criticized quite a bit. One thing about the core of the New York Mets, and I'm going to knock on wood when I say this, they play. They play. Remember the Francisco Lindor closing the door in LA incident? And he busted up his finger and then boom, he's playing. Pete Alonso, whether it was last year with Charlie Morton, and I know he didn't play well, so there's criticism to him coming back early, but he came back early. And then even this, Pete Alonso didn't miss any games. Pete Alonso got hit, comes out of the game. The next day, he's pinch hitting, getting a double. The day after that, he's in the lineup. Crazy. Let's get to these roster moves. We touched on a few of them. Beatty down makes complete sense. I know that the story that was put out there on SNY during the broadcast from Steve Gelbs was the Mets don't think he's far off. They love what he's done defensively. By the way, I agree with all that stuff. They think it could be a short trip down there. Look, to me, a part of the why the trip is down there is because the roster doesn't fit right now. So we'll see what he does in AAA, but he's got a lot to prove. I don't think any of us feel very comfortable about him being a major leaguer. On the other end, Mark Vientos looks great. He looks better defensively. He, too, has looked improved. Not as good as Beatty, but he looks improved. And he's hitting. He's hitting, man. He's hitting the cover off the ball. The DFAing of Omar Narvaez. Look, Omar Narvaez was so bad, shockingly bad, in my opinion, that I get David Stern saying, oh, what are we doing? Why are we keeping this guy around? Especially with Francisco Alvarez on his way back. He began his rehab assignment, hit a home run. So that's certainly positive that Francisco will be back soon. And Tomas Nido could be the backup catcher. We'll see about Luis Torrens, the guy they got from the Yankees. Right now, Tomas Nido should play every day. Right now, Tomas Nido has earned. I can't believe I'm saying it either. Tomas Nido has earned the backup catching job. He hasn't been the easy out he was last year. He's been solid defensively. No issue. No issue at all. But I do like, and I think a lot of us like this. Here's a guy in Omar Narvaez. He's a veteran. He's hitting 155. Nothing personal. Dude, it isn't good enough. You're gone. Tough to complain about that. Tough to get angry about that. And I think what made it easier to do is knowing Alvarez is on his way back. And knowing that, hey, Omar Narvaez ain't going to stick anyway. So let's just move on now. We'll take a look at Luis Torrens and see what he's got. He's a veteran. He's been around. He was in the Yankee organization, but I remember in the major leagues with Seattle. So they make that roster move. They reconfigure their bullpen a little bit with Danny Young coming up, with Jorge Lopez being DFA'd. And I want to make this clear because I saw an email about this Jorge Lopez thing. And I don't know if I expressed it clear here or if it was just on the air. I know I definitely said it on the air. And that was, let me read the email from Dean Barnaby, and then I'll respond. Dean writes, Evan, I agree with you that Lopez was misquoted about the teammate nonsense, but please stop acting like that is the line that got him DFA'd. First question, did you speak to Stearns and Mendy? Answer, no. Lie. Second question, do you regret throwing your glove? Do you regret throwing your glove? The answer is no. That's why he's gone. And to not be a jerk or sound insensitive, but if he does not understand those two questions, he really should not be doing the interview in English. I also agree Mendy could mention the lost in translation issue, but the lie and no apology warrants the DFA. The pod is a must listen. Thank you, Dean. It's tough, man, because I don't know what I said here and what I said on the air, but what I made very clear on the air is he was not DFA'd for the comment. To me, I wouldn't have DFA'd him for that misinterpreted comment. The DFA specifically, and it wasn't, look, the lying about the Mendy and Stearns thing, you are right about. That's not what I said, but you're right about it. He got DFA'd because he showed no remorse on something the manager was mad at. Like, think about all of us. If our boss calls us into a meeting and is mad at us for something we did, and then 5 minutes later, someone asks us about the thing we did, are we going to say we have no remorse? And I don't think that was misinterpreted, by the way. That's why he got DFA'd. I agree with you. And the other thing is, what happened in the meeting with Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns? Did it go well? If he's not showing remorse publicly, he probably didn't show remorse to them. Now, I don't think throwing the glove is this criminal offense, but if you're the manager of a baseball team and you have a problem with it, and a guy doesn't feel bad about it after you tell them that, you're gone. So we're actually on the same page, Dean. And I thought I said that. I definitely said it on the air. Not sure what I said here. I don't know if I made that clear enough, but we do appreciate you listening. And I wanted to read that email because, yeah, he was DFA'd because of the lack of remorse for the glove situation. And the jury's out on Carlos Mendoza. I think we all know that. We don't know what kind of manager he is. Carlos Mendoza, in my opinion, especially if he believes it, and I think he does, should have had the guts to say to the Mets beat writers, I don't like what you did. He should have said that. Pete Alonso said that. So for everybody killing Pete Alonso for being some kind of klutz who can't speak, he's the guy who said, I feel bad for Jorge Lopez. He got misinterpreted. The manager didn't say that. The manager had a chance to stand up, especially for the Spanish-speaking ball players in that locker room whose second language is English and is talking to the media every day. He had a chance to say, hey, guys, and you don't have to be confrontational about it. Hey, guys, I don't like what happened that night. I don't like the fact that you guys ran like it was a race to social media to say, he said this is the worst effing team in the MLB. When you could tell, we all could tell, it didn't sound like it was that. Jared Levison has a really good idea. I like this idea. Jared writes, longtime listener, first-time emailer. It made me die laughing and happy after our Friday night win. We're still 9 games under 500, but what do we have to lose? We should own our dysfunction. If we do, the fear we have of the same old Mets will go away, or at least it won't hurt as bad. And he included a picture of Jorge Lopez talking to the media with the words, "You just lost to the worst team in probably the whole effing MLB." Now, even if I think this was misinterpreted, that is a funny little picture you could send out after every Met victory. So, like, for example, I don't know any Diamondback fans, but if the Mets beat the Phillies in London, that GIF, if you will, being tweeted out at Philly fans is kind of funny. You just lost to the worst team in probably the whole effing MLB, and it's a picture of Jorge Lopez. I think it's a very good idea. That should be our rallying cry now. The rallying cry should be, you just lost to the worst team ever. And what's funny about that, JD Martinez, a lot has come out about this meeting, players only meeting. And JD Martinez essentially said, we got to go in there thinking everybody thinks we're the worst team anyway. And it basically takes the pressure off. Look, whatever works. I don't think any of us give a crap. Go out and win. And they've won. They've won 2 games in a row. So now on this homestand, let's do the math. 1-2, 1-5, 3-5. So if they can win the next 2 games, they could somehow make this a 5-5 road trip or homestand. Sean Manaea on the mound tomorrow. Jose Quintana on the mound on Sunday. And then they go to Washington. So this is a part of the schedule where you're facing teams that are not great, teams that are under 500. They've got 3 games in Washington, D.C., along with these 2 against Arizona. So 5 more games before the London trip. And here's the thing about London. They're off Thursday. They're off Friday. They play Saturday. They play Sunday. And then they're off Monday before they come home and play the Marlins. So, all right, let's play the game. Let's try to make ourselves believe, because they are 9 games under 500. There's a long way to go. 2 against Arizona, 3 against Washington. Can you win 4 out of 5? Is that asking too much? If you win 4 out of 5, you're 6 games under 500. Can you split in London against the Phillies, and then when you come home, sweep the Marlins, 3 games under 500? We're back. That's what would get me believing again. You do all that, and they're 3 games under 500, middle of June, probably a couple of games out of a wild card spot. Now we're cooking with gas. A long way to go. The odds are they'll probably lose the next 2 games against the Diamondbacks. We'll see. Darryl Strawberry having his number retired on Saturday. That should be very, very cool. I was always against the retirement of a lot of numbers, but look, now that the cat is out of the bag, if you will, I'm happy for Darryl. And I'm happy that we get at least a day to celebrate our history. One thing about Steve Cohen, because Steve Cohen takes a lot of crap, some of it from me, mostly with the in-game experience and what's happened with prices and the way season ticket holders are being handled, things like that. And some others, it's just the lack of success. And I totally get that. What non-Met fans don't understand about Steve Cohen, they will never understand this. There are certain things very tough to understand if you're not a fan. One of the things Steve did for us is he loves our history. He put a statue of Tom Seaver. You can mock it, but he did. He brought back Old Timers Day. He's retired these numbers. The old owner felt like resented the Mets. It felt like the old owner hated Met history. Hence why when Citi Field first opened, there was no mention of it. So there's a lot of different things about Steve Cohen, things that you like, things that you criticize, things that you are appreciative of. It's not like one encompassing thing. There's a lot of different aspects of it. As a season ticket holder, I always hold the old owner accountable. If there are things we don't like, yeah, I mean, trust me, I get tons of emails about it. Things I'm not even aware of. I try to be aware of everything as a season ticket holder, but it's impossible. And so those are things where you look at it and say, hey, Steve, be better. Obviously, the team stuff, be better. That goes without saying. But the history stuff matters, and it's important. And it's great that he does that because the old ownership didn't. So for anyone who says anything about the Wilpons versus the Cohens, they don't get it, because Steve loves the history of the Mets. The Wilpons resented the history of the Mets. Maybe a small thing, but it's an important thing. Can email the pod anytime, thericob@gmail.com. thericob@gmail.com. We'll check voicemails too after this Arizona series, 725-222-8699. But we appreciate you listening. Download. Look at Pete Hoffman. Are you at the WFAN studios, Pete?
I just got here, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hoff is such a pro. He sets up the live YouTube that will go into a podcast as he's leaving his house. And then as I'm about to wrap it up, he's at the radio station. It was like perfect symmetry and timing, right?
No, it was beautiful. Thank you for hitting me up as I'm about to walk out the door. It was perfect timing. Let's go Mets, baby. Finish that number.
Mets. Let's go Mets. LGM. Thank you very much for listening and downloading another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.